Welcome back to Tales in the Day by NK. Once upon a time lived a girl named Kesai. I'm about to tell you something that will change how you see the ocean forever. Beneath the crashing waves of the coast of Lagos, Nigeria, lies a kingdom more magnificent than anything you've ever imagined. Osanien, they called it. A coral city that sparkled with bioluminescent gardens, where the most beautiful water spirits you could ever dream of lived in harmony with the sea itself. Kesai emerged from the ocean depths, her dark skin glistening with scales that caught the moonlight, ready to sacrifice everything for a love that could destroy two kingdoms. But what happened next left an entire village questioning everything they knew about the spirits of the deep. Kesai was 19, the daughter of Queen Amora, the most powerful water spirit along the entire West African coast. But Kesai was different. While other mermaids were content to swim through their coral palaces and tend to their underwater gardens, Kesai spent her days gazing upward, wondering what lay beyond the surface of their water world. Her skin was like polished obsidian, and when the light hit her just right, you could see the faint shimmer of scales that marked her as royalty. But it wasn't her beauty that made her special, it was her heart. A heart that refused to accept that two worlds had to remain forever apart. For years, she had been secretly watching the fishing village of Bedigri above. She collected the nets that fishermen lost in storms, gathered their dropped tools, and listened to their songs that drifted down through the water. Each artifact told her a story about the humans above, and with each story, her curiosity grew stronger. Her best friend Adoni tried to warn her. "Kesai, you don't understand what they are capable of," she would say, touching the scars on her arms from the day human fishermen had tried to capture her with their nets. But Kesai couldn't stop wondering, what if Adoni was wrong? What if humans weren't the monsters their people believed them to be? The night everything changed started like any other storm. The winds howled above the water, and the waves crashed with a violence that even the mermaids found frightening. But Kesai heard another human voice calling for help. She found him struggling against the waves, a young man about her age with strong arms that fought desperately against the current. His name was Tond, though she didn't know it then. All she knew was that he was drowning, and something deep in her soul wouldn't let her swim away. The moment she pulled him to safety, the moment their eyes met in that brief second before she disappeared back into the depths, both their worlds shifted forever. Tond caught just a glimpse of her, the mysterious woman with skin like midnight who had saved his life, but it was enough to obsess over for the rest of his days. And Kesai. She couldn't stop thinking about the gratitude she had seen in his eyes, the way he had whispered thank you even as the waves tried to claim him. Above the surface, Tond's world was falling apart. His family's fishing business, passed down through generations, was dying. The fish were disappearing, the nets came back empty day after day, and his father Babatunde grew sicker with worry and stress. They were 3 months behind on their boat payments, and the whole village of Bedigri was struggling to survive. But Tond couldn't focus on any of that. Every night, he returned to the shore where he had nearly drowned, leaving offerings of fruit and fresh water, following half-remembered traditions his grandmother had taught him about honoring the spirits of the sea. Meanwhile, beneath the waves, Queen Amora discovered her daughter's secret through the magical surveillance that protected their kingdom. The confrontation that followed shook the very foundations of Osanien. "You foolish child!" Amora's voice thundered through the coral halls. "Do you know what you've done? Do you know why we stay hidden from the surface world?" That's when Kesai learned the truth that had shaped her mother's entire life. 50 years ago, Amora had a sister named Mana, beautiful and kind like Kesai, but with the same dangerous curiosity about humans. Mana had been killed, or so Amora believed, by human fishermen who feared what they didn't understand. "They are destroyers, Kesai," her mother said, tears mixing with the seawater around them. "They take everything beautiful and pure and turn it into something ugly. Promise me you will never go to the surface again." But Kesai couldn't make that promise. Because every night, she returned to watch Tond and his village, and she began to see something her mother couldn't: the humans were dying too. The pollution from Lagos, the overfishing, the way the modern world had forgotten the old agreements between land and sea, it was killing both worlds. The ocean was sick, and so was the village above. Kesai realized that only by working together could both worlds survive. Night after night, she began secretly helping. She guided schools of fish toward Ton's nets, hoping to ease his family's suffering just a little. She used her magic to clean the waters around their boats, to make their catches more plentiful. But other mermaids began to notice. They reported back to Queen Amora, and the underwater kingdom buzzed with rumors of the princess who couldn't stay away from the forbidden surface. Then came the night Kesai decided she couldn't hide anymore. Under a full moon that turned the ocean silver, she revealed herself to Ton on a secluded stretch of beach. Imagine his shock. The woman who had saved his life, rising from the waves like something out of his grandmother's oldest stories, her tail splitting into legs as she stepped onto the sand. "You're real," he whispered, and she nodded. "I'm real, and I need your help," she said. "Both our worlds are dying, and I think we're the only ones who can save them." They talked for hours that night. Ton told her about the village's struggles, about his father's illness, about a wealthy businessman named Emeka who kept pressuring families to sell their land for a luxury resort. Kesai told him about the underwater kingdom, about the fear that kept the worlds apart, about her mother's pain that had hardened into hatred. But their midnight meetings couldn't stay secret forever. The village elder, Mama Folek, had been watching Ton's strange behavior, following him to the beach, witnessing things that made her remember stories she thought were just folklore. When she finally confronted them both, Kesai expected anger or fear. Instead, Mama Folek began to cry. "Child," she said to Kesai, "I have been waiting 70 years for this moment. My grandmother told me stories of the time when our people worked together, when the spirits of the sea guided our nets and we honored them with our respect. She told me that one day, when both land and sea faced destruction, a bridge between worlds would be built through the sacrifice of true understanding. That's when they learned about the prophecy. Once every century, when both realms were in mortal danger, the barriers could be dissolved, but only through a sacrifice that required giving up everything familiar and safe." But the prophecy wasn't the only secret that came to light. Adoni, desperate to save her friend from what seemed like certain doom, began investigating the real story of Queen Amora's sister. What she discovered changed everything. Mana hadn't been killed by fishermen at all. She had died trying to save human children from a tsunami, and in their grief and confusion, the surviving fishermen had blamed the sea spirits for the disaster that followed. The separation between worlds had been built on mutual misunderstanding, on trauma that had festered in the darkness for 50 years. Armed with this knowledge, Kesai knew what she had to do. But the path forward would require a sacrifice she never imagined. Deep in the most dangerous part of the ocean lived a being known as Umoja's shadow, a sea witch who dealt in transformations and impossible choices. She offered Kesai what she desperately wanted, human form for 30 days to bridge the worlds. But the price wasn't her voice, as the old stories might tell you. The price was her connection to the ocean itself. If she failed to unite both communities before the new moon, she would become fully human forever, but the ocean would die from the severed connection. And if she returned to the sea without success, the village would be consumed by rising tides caused by their damaged ecosystem. Can you imagine making a choice like that? Knowing that failure meant the death of everything you were trying to save. Kesai accepted the bargain. The transformation was unlike anything you could imagine. Her tail dissolved into legs, her gills sealed shut, and suddenly she was breathing air for the first time in her life. But with her human form came human vulnerabilities. She could be hurt, she could die, and she had only 30 days to accomplish the impossible. Working with Tond, she began the delicate process of convincing the village that their salvation lay not in Emeka's resort deal, but in reviving the ancient partnerships with the sea. She demonstrated her power by healing Tond's father, using sea spirit medicine to cure the illness that had been eating away at him. She showed the fisherman how to read the currents the way her people did, how to fish sustainably so the ocean could replenish itself. Mama Folek became her strongest ally, teaching the village the old ceremonies, the old ways of honoring the relationship between land and sea. For a few beautiful days, it seemed like it might actually work. But Emeka wasn't going to give up his multi-million-dollar resort project without a fight. The businessman had been watching, learning, and he discovered something that chilled Kesai to her very bones. He knew about the mermaids. Not only did he know, but he had a plan to capture them and turn them into the centerpiece of a supernatural tourism empire. Sign over your land, he told the village council, or I'll bring government officials and international media here. I'll expose your sea spirits to the world, and we'll see how long your little fantasy lasts when scientists and trophy hunters start showing up. With only 5 days left in her human form, Kesai watched her carefully built bridge between worlds begin to crumble. The villagers were terrified. Even those who had begun to believe were now paralyzed by fear of what exposure would mean. Underwater, Queen Amora faced her own crisis. Her people were demanding action, calling for a preemptive strike against the surface world before the humans could attack them. Even Adoni, despite her loyalty to Kesai, began to argue that maybe isolation was the only way to survive. But Kesai realized something as she stood on the beach with 3 days left, watching Emeka's armed mercenaries surround the village. The sacrifice of true understanding didn't mean just bringing the worlds together. It meant facing the truth, all of it, even the parts that hurt. She called for a gathering on the beach at sunset. Everyone came, the villagers huddled in fear, Emeka and his men with their weapons, and rising from the waves like a goddess of the deep, Queen Amora herself. For the first time in 50 years, the Queen of the Sea faced the people of the land. I want to tell you all a story, Kesai said, her voice carrying across the sand. A story about 2 people who loved each other once, and how fear and misunderstanding tore them apart. She told them about Mana, about the tsunami, about the children who had died despite her sacrifice. She told them about the grief that had driven both communities to blame each other instead of the cruel randomness of nature itself. Queen Amora wept as the truth washed over her. The fishermen wept as they understood that their ancestors' anger had been born from love, not hatred, love for the children they couldn't save. But Emeka laughed. Touching story, he said, signaling to his men. But it doesn't change anything. I'm still taking this land, and I'm still taking your mermaids. That's when Mama Folek stepped forward. At 70 years old, she placed herself between Emeka's guns and the Sea Queen, and began to sing. It was an old song, older than the separation, older than the fear. One by one, the villagers joined in. Then Adoni's voice rose from the waves, and other mermaids began to surface, adding their voices to the ancient harmony. Even Tond, who had never heard the song before, felt the words coming to his lips as if his ancestors were singing through him. The song was about unity, about the marriage of land and sea, about the truth that no one owns the ocean and everyone belongs to it. As the voices rose together, something magical began to happen. If you enjoyed this incredible story and want to hear more amazing tales like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Emeka's weapons began to rust in his hands. His government papers crumbled to dust. The corruption that had given him power couldn't stand against the pure truth of the song, against the unity of 2 peoples who had found each other again. As dawn broke on Kesai's final day in human form, she stood at the water's edge knowing she had a choice to make. But as she prepared to dive back into the sea to save it from dying, Queen Amora took her daughter's hand. The sacrifice of true understanding, she said softly, was never about choosing one word or the other. It was about understanding that they were never separate at all. The magic that had divided the worlds dissolved like sea foam. Kesai felt her connection to the ocean restored, but her human form remained. She had become something new, a bridge between realms, able to transform from woman to mermaid as needed, belonging fully to both worlds. Emeka fled as his empire of exploitation crumbled around him. The village became a protected cultural and environmental site, the first of its kind. Ton and Kesai built a new kind of relationship, one based on partnership rather than conquest, working together to heal the damage that decades of separation had caused. Queen Amora established a council with both humans and mermaids, creating new laws to protect the ocean while allowing sustainable interaction between the communities. Adoni became the first mermaid ambassador to the surface world, overcoming her scars to help other divided communities find their way back to each other. But the most beautiful part of this story is what happened next. Word spread along the coast. Other fishing villages began reporting strange dreams of underwater cities and spirits who wanted to come home. From Senegal to South Africa, similar reunions began taking place as other sea peoples remembered that they didn't have to hide forever. The ocean began to heal. Fish populations returned. The water grew clearer. And children, both human and mermaid, grew up learning each other's songs, knowing that they belonged to the same world after all. Kesai's story shows us that true transformation doesn't come from changing ourselves to fit into other worlds, but from building bridges that honor who we are on both sides. Sometimes what looks like an impossible choice between two things we love is actually an invitation to discover that love is big enough to hold everything. What would you do if you discovered an entire civilization living right beneath your feet? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single one. The next time you stand at the edge of any ocean, remember Kesai's story. Remember that beneath those waves might be someone just like you, curious about your world, hoping for connection instead of conflict, waiting for the courage to reach across the divide between what is and what could be. Because sometimes, the most powerful magic isn't about transformation at all. It's about recognizing that the barriers we think separate us are often just reflections of our own fear, and that love, true understanding love, makes all boundaries disappear. And that, my friends, is how a fisherman's daughter became the queen of two worlds. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and comment. This is Tales in the Day by NK. Till I come your way again. Bye.